Hello to all of our wonderful friends in falconry from around the world. Thank you all again so much for joining us for this last episode of the Arizona Falconers Association series, which is a tribute to Harry McElroy. After talking to Harry and after recording all of these episodes for all these amazing people in Arizona, it became apparent pretty quickly that a tribute episode to Harry needed to happen. There's no way, as we stated before, that you can encompass what someone who's been on this earth for over 90 years has meant to so many people. And yeah, I guess the only way that we can kind of sometimes continue on somebody's story is by letting other people share their recollection and memories of a person, and just to give different perspectives on what someone's friendship and falconry contributions have meant. And the perfect way to do that, I've found, is by letting a group of people share their sentiments and experiences with a certain individual with the rest of the world. And I know I would like to start off by saying thank you again to Harry and Beth for allowing me into their home and for their willingness to share some of their life experiences with the wider world and for helping to make this series happen. My only regret is the same regret that I've had with some other falconers that I am now fortunate to be able to call friends, and that I wish I could have known you all sooner and had a chance to go hawking with you all and, just to get to know you better and, a little bit longer. But such is life, and, I hope that this episode, along with the episode that I did with you for, our 100th episode, did a small amount of justice to tell your story a little bit. And without saying any more, I'm going to go ahead and just turn things over to Jamaica Smith and let her start off this tribute by sharing some of her favorite memories and recollections.
Thank you, John. We're honored that you came and spent Mother's Day weekend working so hard on behalf of the club, and we're really glad that you were able to get an interview in with Harry. And 10 minutes. Do you have an hour? I could talk for an hour. I could talk for 3 hours about Harry. So I've been an Arizona Falconer my whole falconry career, and Harry was one of the founding members of the Arizona Falconers Association, and Harry is a living legend within Arizona, and we think very highly of him here. And my first opportunity to meet Harry came very early. I got started in falconry in 1996. And then because I was young and didn't know any better, I got roped into club politics right away and was just a regional coordinator type thing for the club at that time. But we had a little kerfuffle happen within the club, and there was a split between the officers, and I stood firm on the principles I felt strongly about, and ironically, the guy that was kind of heading the charge on the opposite side of the fence, we're now super good friends too. So it's funny how all of that works out over time. But at any rate, after that had all gone down, and I don't even recall now how Harry was even aware of all of this going on. Perhaps we were communicating via email, I'm not sure. But he took the time to make an inscription in the front of a book and gift it to me, and telling me that he was impressed with what I had done on the stand that I had taken on behalf of the club and falconry at the time. And I was just like flabbergasted that Harry McElroy had noticed that, and that kind of opened the door to going to visit Harry at his house in Wilcox and getting to go out with him and see him fly the great Harris Hawk Refugio that he was flying at the time, and see him on horseback. He was on muleback the first time that we went with him. And I think the second time we went down there, he had started to collect his Peruvian horses, and we got to go out with him and see him in action. And it was truly, amazing to watch, and inspired me that not so much that I wanted to become a horseback hawker, but because I saw how hard work that was, but just that I wanted to reach the level of falconry that Harry was at. And Harry's falconry wasn't really about the training of the birds. It was about working with the birds to get the best game hawking out of them. He was truly a dedicated game hawker, and that's what inspired me. I wanted to be that, and I wanted to hunt quail after seeing Harry hunt quail. And so I got a Harris hawk, and I tried to hunt quail and discovered it's a lot harder than Harry made it look like. And I knew right away, well, first thing I got to do is get a dog. And Harry was a big help with any time I had a question about what should I be doing to improve my Harris hawking or my quail hawking. He was a source, and he never hesitated to provide me with the advice that he had available for me. And he was just very generous in that way. And so he had switched from Harris hawks to Aplamados, and he was still in Wilcox and trying to fly a female that he had already been flying for a season. And this next season, her second season, he was trying to add a male and cast fly them. And the little male just wasn't doing well and had this weird little wing infection, and he was trying to treat it with the help of his vet, and it just wasn't going well. And he was very impressed with my husband Greg's falconry, and he wanted to gift this Aplomado to Greg because he thought Greg would enjoy hunting quail with that Aplomado. And I explained to Harry, I said, I think Harry, you're the kind of person that will hunt quail with any hawk that'll hunt quail, because that's what you're about. But Greg is more about the accipiters, so he'll hunt anything that's available to hunt as long as he's flying an accipiter. And I said, he's not really interested in the Aplomado, but I would be, because I had seen Jim Nelson talk about Aplomados, and I thought, well, that is just really neat, but I'll never be able to afford an Aplomado. And so Harry gifted me that little Tiercel Aplomado, and he went on to be an amazing quail hawk. I spent 3 years flying him, and that first year that I got him, shortly after he gifted him to me, Harry made the decision to move to Kingman. I had jokingly suggested that we had an awful lot of quail when he started talking about maybe I want to move where there's some quail. And he moved to Kingman, and suddenly I had an amazing opportunity to learn quail hawking by going quail hawking with one of the true masters of quail hawking and doing it from horseback to boot. And so we dove right in. I flew that little Tiercel Aplomado by myself for a couple of months that fall, and then pretty soon discovered that I was going to do better if I was on a horse, and Harry loaned me one of his horses. And next thing you know, he says, well, I think we should just start going out together. And so I just started going out with Harry. Every other day we would fly those Aplomados together, and we did that for 3 years with my Tiercel Aplomado, and he flew a couple of different females during that time. And what an incredible gift to spend that kind of time and learn from someone like Harry McElroy. And then we transitioned at that point when he was ready to move on to something different. He wanted to go back to Harris hawks, and I had a decision to make. Do I keep flying my Aplomado by myself, or do I keep hawking with Harry McElroy? Well, that was a no-brainer, and I think I felt amazed that Aplomado had been successful for 3 seasons. He took over 300 head of quail over 3 seasons, and he had some close calls, but he hadn't been killed. And that's, I felt like they had a little sign on their back that said, available to eat, to everything out there. So I felt like, we had run our course. And so I placed him in a breeding program and went ahead and got into Harris hawking with Harry so that I could continue to hawk with Harry. And I also decided I had to get my own horse and did everything that was necessary to keep, to extend those amazing years of quail hawking together. And that entire time, he was so generous with me and my family with things like gifting me that hawk and eventually gifting one of his horses to my daughter when she got too big to ride double with me on the horse. And the three of us would be out there in the desert, him on his Peruvian and she on the Peruvian that he had gifted to her, and me on my little Mustang that wasn't a Peruvian and was quite the character. Gave us a lot of epic adventures as well. So Harry's time here in Kingman is something that I will treasure for the rest of my days. It was truly formative in my falconry experience. It made me who I am today in terms of my memories and my skills as a falconer today. And I can't ever express how grateful I am for that opportunity to spend that time with Harry and become a great part of a great friendship as well, because he's just such a generous and caring person. And I've always, when people have asked about Harry, Harry McElroy, and I'll say, well, if you're interested in flying a Giarmato or Cooper's Hawk or whatever it is, and you're looking for advice, you just send him an email. He really loves interacting with people, and people would always be kind of astonished that he was that easy to get in touch with and that reachable. And he's just a really nice guy, like a lot of other falconers I've met in the falconry community. And I would describe him to people as a true gentleman, a true master falconer who was always interested in learning from other falconers. That's what always amazed me. I would take someone to meet him, and they could be a brand new apprentice flying their very first hawk, and he would sit down and have a genuine conversation with that person and make them feel really good, but he wasn't doing it to make them feel really good. That was just a side effect. He was genuinely interested in learning from everybody's falconry experience, and I think that's part of what makes him an exceptional human today and made him an exceptional falconer throughout his 70-plus year career as a falconer. So thank you, Harry, for everything you've done.
Thanks so much, Jamaica, for sharing all that with us. It was a great way to get us started here on this tribute episode. And now we're going to hear from Matt Mullinex and hear what he has to say about some of his memories and experiences with Harry.
Thanks, John, for letting me chime in here on the Harry McElroy show. I have to say that there's really no way to underestimate or overestimate, rather, how much of an impact Harry's writing and his falconry have had on my own writing and falconry. Just been sort of a fundamental sea change and kind of, I found him right at the right time. I had been practicing falconry for a couple of years, not particularly well. Had found some good mentors, which was a big step in the right direction. But the texts that were available at the time were, basically the old English texts. And there was North American Falconry and Hunting Hawks, but it was a little bit stiff and, didn't seem to apply to everything I was trying to do or to my area. I mean, I was hunting squirrels in Georgia with red-tailed hawks, and this was, even in North American Falconry and Hunting Hawks at the time was not really a well described, part of the sport. So the thing that I found in Harry's book, and it was Desert Hawking, that was so amazing to me was that it was clear that his focus was on catching things. I mean, this was a book that you could hear Harry's voice clearly through it. It was well presented, small paragraphs, simple statements, pretty funny. I found, and have continued to find him very funny. Um, but on every page there was something that was unmistakably focused on hunting, on actually catching things, and everything else was sort of secondary. And this was really the first book by anybody I had read where it was less about process and procedure and how things ought to look and how things should work in ideal circumstances, and really more about how things actually happen in the field. And and it was like curtain was pulled away, and you got to see actual falconry, and a guy that was actually doing it, and writing about how it worked, and sometimes how it didn't work, which is also just as helpful. So so Harry gave that to everybody. And the first Desert Hawking was, I guess it was, he was, I know he was writing in the 60s. I think that came out in the 70s. Um, so there's been at least two generations of falconers who have really benefited from Harry's books. And he's got about four of them, but he also was writing in the British journals from time to time, and in other journals, North American journals. And so we all had an opportunity to learn from him. I later in life was able to go meet him, which was fantastic. I've been out there twice, and both times have just had exactly the experience that you think you would have. Going up to the master, and he is not coincidentally like a at this time in his life when I met him, was sort of like the little old man on the hill, and you had to climb the hill to get up to him and talk to him, and found him to be wonderfully friendly and hospitable, and open with his knowledge as much as you would expect him from anything he's written. And um, and the first time I went out there, actually had just a fantastic experience of taking my Harris Hawk out on one of his horses, and riding out into the same area that he hunted in every day for years and years, and was surprised to see the Harris Hawk take to it, and kind of a funny story. I had never hawked on horseback. So Harry just sort of, I guess he asked me if I'd ever ridden a horse, but I don't think he even really cared, frankly. I think he trusted the horse pretty well, and the horse was wonderful. I think it was the horse's name was Dancer, a Peruvian paso that he likes, um, and so Dancer took me out, and I, remembered how to ride. I think it hadn't been, it'd been since high school since I'd been on the back of a horse. The Harris Hawk was much more comfortable than I was. We got out in the field and caught a rabbit pretty quick off the back of a horse, which I, had the presence of mind to realize how cool that was, and how I'm probably never going to do it again. But in my excitement, I jumped off the horse and ran over and made into my hawk, and was picking up the hawk on the rabbit, and looked behind me, and the horse had sort of galloped away. Harry McElroy's horse out into the desert, probably half a mile back to the trailer. And so I was panicked and embarrassed, and just really didn't know what to do. But I yelled, and the horse, I could see the horse in the distance lift its head up and ran all the way back. Dancer ran all the way back to me and stopped right in front of me, let me remount, and take him all the way back. So a testament to Harry's ability to train anything, evidently, just as well as his hawks. So that was fun, and a cherished memory. I know that everybody who has had an opportunity to meet Harry or read Harry has similar story. Back in the day, we used to call him because this was prior to the internet, and And I'm sure he fielded calls, pretty much as soon as he got home, and for the rest of the night. But every single time he was just as gracious and generous with his information as he could be. I remember as it got later on in years, you had to talk louder and louder. And, and now I'm in the position where somebody's got to talk louder to me too. So I really appreciate that. Fantastic patience and wonderful help to the entire community. So, look, I'm glad you're able to share your stories from Harry and talk to the man himself and get him on record for forever. So people can have at least a little bit of taste of what the rest of us have been fortunate to know in person. Harry, if you're listening to this, thank you so much. You've been a huge impact, positive on my falconry, and I can't thank you enough for that.
We appreciate you, Matt, and thanks again for being a part of this episode and for sharing all of those thoughts with us. And now we're going to hear from a couple of other falconers who have been known throughout their time for flying their Harris's hawks as well, and they've also been friends with Harry for a very long time, and they wanted to share some of their favorite memories and recollections of their time knowing Harry as well. Here's Tom and Jen Colson.
Yeah, well, one thing that I would say is desert hawking really changed falconry, period. Yeah. And I would say that it was influential around the world because it was one of the few books of its time that actually talked about hunting. The competing, like the main falconry book that was out there, at least for the U.S., was North American Falconry and Hunting Hawks by Beebe and Webster. And, people may not realize today, but that book went through a lot of revisions. And the early versions of it, really fell short of what a falconer needs to perform falconry. And I remember it held me back because of some of the bad advice that was in there that's since been revised. But Harry's book really talked about hunting and told you how to hunt and made you want to hunt, so I think it was revolutionary.
Yeah, and to me, being from the Louisiana swamps, the Arizona desert I always was interested in the desert since it's so opposite the place I hunt. So I always was intrigued by all his desert pictures and cactus and things. I actually had a huge cactus greenhouse at one time. I got addicted to all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so we just became kindred spirits, and we'd see him every year or two and hunt, and then I guess after a while, he respected us as far as finding game and all. So he had never caught a bobwhite quail as far as I remember. So he wanted to catch a bobwhite with his Harris hawk Refugio, which is great Harris hawk. It's the bird he caught the most quail, whatever. We catch over 100 quail a year, in fact, quite a bit more than that. So anyway, we went in Odessa, Midland, Texas, hunting the first trip. Found a lot of quail and a lot of rabbits. So we came back and called Harry. Well, Harry, we found bobwhite. They're crazy. They're not that far from you. He was living, Wilcox at the time, I believe, which isn't that far from West Texas. So Harry never travels. I don't know if you know that with his birds. He just never would travel. Even though he travels all over the country, moved everywhere, but he doesn't go travel when he hunted.
But he had such an entourage.
He had the horses and all his other things.
All the dogs.
Right. So he just didn't do it. But we kept, badgering, finally go, the bobwhite, I think you can really get him there, Harry, really get him there. So sure enough, he says, let's go, let's do it. And this was probably around 2000, I'm guessing, somewhere around there, a little bit after 2000. So anyway, we met him in Odessa and found a quail.
And got a bunch of friends together.
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of friends. They got a bunch of his friends. I guess we had about 8 of us there at least. And sure enough, we'd hunt all day, and then we hunted with Harry in the evening. And sure enough, bobwhite gets up, Refugio flies that thing down 300-400 yards. I'm the only one that can run. Harry doesn't. I don't think he had a horse. He didn't bring his horse. So I ran. Saw where the hawk went down. It was almost dark. I get there. I'm looking for it. There's a passage Harris hawk with the pintail duck on top of a mesquite. It's just killed a pintail. It ends up by a little lake in the middle of the desert. And I'm looking at this Harris hawk pluck a pintail right in front of me, and I look down, and there's and there's Harry's bird on the quail at the same time. And I'm going, how do I, this is just a perfect moment. And Harry's back 200 yards back, but I'm kind of like, hurry, And he gets there, and the Harris flew off, and the pintail stayed there anyway. But Harry, and then Harry's a character. I don't know if you know that, but a real character. So once he gets everything under control, he has the hawk hooded, and he has the quail in his hand. He starts making the quail talk. He's been making the lips go up and down, and he's so happy. I've never seen Harry that happy. And he has the quail saying all kind of little things. He's got different voices, and we were all laughing. And I'll never forget that. But he caught another quail or two, and it was a great time. Probably the last time he's traveled hunting, I think.
Yeah, I remember him. He had several dogs, and Andrew was there.
From
Andrew,
South Africa.
Yeah, from South Africa. Andrew Barnes, right, was helping him to handle the dogs because they were a handful, and his Continental Pointer was way out there, and called the white dog. And I said at some point, I was like, "Hey Harry, I haven't seen the white dog in a while. Where's the white dog?" And he says, "That's a good question, Jennifer." And so we go looking for the white dog, and the poor white dog is like trembling when we find it because it's on point, And I'm like, I wonder how long that thing's been sitting there trembling, But anyway, the quail. Then he brought in the other dogs to find the quail that because it was pointing way far out, as they do, and so we get a flush and, follow where the quail are. And Tom and I hunt birds all the time, or at least we were at the time. So we were noting where the quail put in, and we're watching the dogs, and Harry and Andrew are digging in one spot and digging in another. And I was just looking around, and I was like, man, I thought one of those quail went right over there. And so I said, Harry, I think there's one here. And a step right there, it flushes, and it goes like a quarter mile, and the Harris hawk goes after it, and it's out of our sight because of plants and stuff. And that's when we end up at the pintail and find his quail. But and, it was a good flight.
Yeah, and then and you have to talk about Beth too when you talk about Harry, because Beth has put up. I mean, she's traveled. I don't know how many times they've moved, maybe 8-10 times in her life. And she's hosted all sorts of strange people, including us. I mean, strangers out of the blue show up, and Harry's house always had somebody there. And Harry didn't kind of entertain you very much. He just kind of has a room in the back, and you went in the back, and then he lived his life, and you lived yours, and it was kind of a wonderful, easy going. It was always kind of easy going without any stress. You didn't feel like nobody was entertaining. Nobody had to go out to eat to do anything. It was just a relaxed atmosphere right from the beginning. And I really respected that. And
so one thing that I would say is a real success point in Harry's falconry is that he's very persistent. And, he, just like all the people that are good falconers or exceptional falconers, they're the ones that do it every day. And they just really get out there, and their birds are important to him, and catching something with their birds is important to him. So he's going to do it. It may take him a while to figure a particular bird out or a particular quarry out or a hunting spot, but he's going to do it until he's successful, and then he's going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and then I guess he's the only person I've ever known that all of us are complaining about the lack of game. I mean, I complain about it all the time, and all our friends do, but Harry was the only person that I ever knew that actually did something about it. I mean, drastically would do something about game. We met him, he was in Wilcox, Arizona, which is southeast Arizona. He had a lot of quail when we first visited, but the quail just died out as they do. They just went the way you couldn't find a quail. With the drought or whatever it was, didn't matter. Harry says, I think I'm going to move. And I didn't take him seriously. I mean, he was already 75 years old or something, 70 years old. He's not going to move, they'll be back next year, quail, but he couldn't wait. Sure enough, next time, talk to Harry, he's got a moving van, and he's going up to Kingman, Arizona.
Building a house on a hill.
Building a house on a hill. You go, what, Harry? And it was, he solved the problem, and then he had quail again, and then, But yeah, that's another thing. Harry always in his books, always about hunting, and that was my idea. Was always about I have to catch things. I have to catch things every day. It's just in my genes, and I have a thrill to chase. And Harry had the same thing, and once I read those books, it changed everything. I read, just every page of them over and over again. And then, of course, I tried to follow all Harry's instructions on flying the Cooper's Hawks and the Harrison. I don't think I got it half right, but it didn't matter. I had a lot of game, and it all kind of worked out. And I think if you met Harry after a while, you go, all what he's written is kind of, he actually didn't do it that way either, if you know what I mean.
Well,
I know he did.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, one thing that he does practice that's really important to good falconry is weight control. Mm-hmm. And he developed the 22-hour weight control that,
it's important, yeah, very important.
Try flying a kestrel or a sharp-shinned hawk without that, let me just say. And I know Matt would chime right in there for sure, too, Matt Mullinex. But, being consistent on the bird's weight and knowing what its hunting weight is and having it at that proper weight, it really keeps the bird healthy. It gives you a lot of action, and it gives you field control. So,
we love him. Love Harry. Yeah, and he's he just changed everything with me with the Harris Hawks. All of a sudden, I just kept going on and getting more and more of them, and then I got into breeding, and then I sent some to Harry, and then other people, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Basically all due to Harry, because I was flying red tails at the time, and they were barely Harris Hawks were just coming in. I guess I got my first Harris Hawk in '77. So Harry's second Desert Hawking 2 came out in '76. So the next winter, I went out, I got me a Harris Hawk, and that changed my life, and here I am today, still fooling with Harris Hawks a long time later. And anyway, that was really awesome. And then he was so kind to ask us to write 3 chapters in his book in '96, I think it was, Desert Hawking with a little help from our friends. That was a really honor to write 3 chapters. Jen did most of it as usual, of course, but I was there to assist. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I would say that Harry is instrumental in bringing the Harris Hawk to the forefront of falconry. I mean, he lived in a good place. They're very desert adapted, and it turns out that they're, even though, where they hunt in the desert, it's pretty specific habitat, they're really adaptable to a lot of falconry situations all over the world. I mean, there are people flying them in Japan and the Czech Republic and South Africa, and you name it. So that was big to have desert hawking introducing the Harris Hawk as a real hunting species that can catch a lot of game. And he understood its cooperation, its cooperative nature. So he wasn't just saying, hey, this is a bird that's successful. He was understanding its psyche and helping falconers to understand that you could use that to your advantage.
Yep. And then he was so kind until we ended up with his great male Harris Hawk, Refugio. He sent him to us after Hurricane Katrina, when we had lost all our birds, and he was one of our main breeders.
Through Jamaica Smith,
right? Through Jamaica. He gave it to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And then Jamaica sent it to us, and that was a big, big help to get ourselves back on firm ground. Yeah, wonderful. But
so the idea of Refugio is being such an exceptional Harris Hawk as a hunter. I don't know about his temperament. I think Harry sometimes, or Jamaica certainly said sometimes he's a little bit of a jerk, but he was a pretty decent temperament. But this bird definitely, when it was retired from hunting, needed to go into a breeding program. And so since we were interested in selective breeding, we had just the female we wanted to match him with and put out some really fine birds.
I could go on about Harry. I mean, but I'm sure I know you've interviewed him and other people, but hey, I would love to think of things. I could talk about Harry all night if I had a glass of, Harry likes, he likes good scotch, by the way, as you probably know, John. Like a little toddy at night. We always used to have one of those, a little toast.
When we would go to visit him, we, go to New Orleans and find a nice bottle of single malt, and we would bring it, and that's like the first thing we walk through the door, hand him the single malt, and he'd say, "Oh, you brought the medicine."
Yes, exactly. That's right. And he's still alive thanks to the medicine.
Yeah, I think it's both Tom and I really owe a lot of our falconry to Harry. And we really appreciate him as a longtime friend. And we've met a lot of people through him, too, that have become close friends, like Rodrigo Monroe Wilson and others. And so he's been an inspiration in so many ways, you know, a teacher, a friend, a hunting companion, and then also,
a leader by example.
Yeah, a leader by example. I remember talking to him oftentimes about raptor conservation work, too, and keeping falconry going and what the problems were with the falconry community or with antis opposing falconry. He's just continued to be a leader, seeing our sport perpetuated and moving forward, and he's a great asset and a great friend.
Well said, Tom and Jen. Thank you all for being a part of this as well. And next, we're going to hear from one of our previous guests from Mexico, being Dr. Rodrigo Monroe Wilson. And he has some things that he would like to share as well.
So Harry McElroy, I think, was a great influence in a lot of Mexican and Latin American falconers of my generation, because he lived in Peru, where he flew bicolored hawks and aplomado falcons. I was living in Peru at that time too. It's funny because we didn't meet at that time, but I then became friends with Oscar Bengolea, who passed away a couple years ago, but he learned from Harry, and he had a big influence in his falconry. And then I think Harry lived in Mexico, in Querétaro, in 1992, I think until 94, where he flew mostly aplomado falcons at quail. And he had a big influence on several, Mexican falconers. I met Harry through Oscar Bengolea and visited him in Willcox, Arizona. I think that was probably around 2006. And he was flying a Passage Harris hawk, an imprint Tirsul goshawk, and also a female aplomado falcon. And we were flying one bird each day, and we were catching quail every day. So that was an interesting experience for me. I visited him for a week and learned a lot. And his falconry techniques, I think, opened up a big door for all of us flying desert quail, and of course flying Harris hawks and those species. The Cooper's hawks, aplomado falcons, even goshawks, right? So I think he's had a big influence, always thinking out of the box, always thinking about what's best for the bird and how to get the most out of a bird. For example, keeping his accipiters free lofted, which is something that I hadn't seen before. He kept his Cooper's hawks free in a chamber. And he would just walk in and call them to the fist, put them on a scale, throw a tidbit into a transport box. He didn't hood the birds. His birds were never tethered to a perch. Their feathers were always perfect. Cooper's hawks are notorious for destroying themselves when they're tied to perches, no matter if they're imprints or passage birds or whatever. So I think that he's continuously thinking out of the box and being very innovative in what he was doing, and he's had a very big influence on most desert hawkers, I guess, from my generation. Not to mention the 24-hour weight control, feeding cycle, and weighing the birds. And I guess he's the one that figured out how to keep your bird at a certain weight and have your bird at a precise weight at the same time the next day, ready to fly. That's another thing that I think we all have to thank him for. Over the years, I've translated a couple articles that they used for the journal for the Spanish Falconers Association, the AECA, and I translated several of those articles. So we had a lot of phone calls when there was something that I didn't understand, and I didn't want to be or I wanted to be accurate in my translation. So we communicated a lot. That was the only time I actually visited him at Wilcox. We had a great time. He was always surprised at how we always pinpointed where the quail was going. I think that I had better eyesight at that time, so I could follow the long flights and see where, in which a patch of cactus or brush the quail had put in. So I think I have the desert hawking with a little help from my friends. And the dedication says, I will always remember how you could reclaim quail from thick cover or something like that. But he always, I mean, to tell you the truth, he always had a super team with several dogs, so that the dogs did most of the work. The dogs and the birds were always on the quail, and we were kind of following along, just following the flight. But most of the time, we would go out there on the trailer out in the open desert, take out the mules, or he had a horse and a mule at that time. And, we would ride out in the desert, release, I think it was 4 dogs that he was running at the time. And any of the birds he was flying, like I mentioned, a hare's hawk or an aplomado or a tiercel goshawk. And it was really a great experience for me because we were catching quail every day with different birds in completely different styles, right? Like the hare's hawk and the goshawk and the aplomado were all doing their thing in their own way, and it was really very interesting and very enlightening for me to watch and be able to partake in that experience. So yeah, that I guess that's a little anecdote with Karen. I have a dedication with the book, and I have all his books. Some of them have become horrendously expensive lately. They're like real collector's items, right? But I think I have most of them, and they're always he was always thinking out of the box and thinking about how to handle the bird or let the bird develop its best characteristics, right? Its best features to fly a certain quarry, but how to hunt with a bird without messing around as little as possible with its nature, right? Like an exhibitor, let him be an exhibitor. Don't try to make an exhibitor a hare's hawk, which you'll never do. So I mean, to never like try to make a bird be tamer than it will naturally be. We started with passage Cooper's hawks, then moved on to imprint Cooper's hawks, and that was like a real game changer. Just in keeping the birds healthy and having a strong bird that would fly quarry, fast and hard. It's not the same, having to cut down the weight of a passage Cooper's hawk just to be able to handle it, than to have an imprint, which is at a very good weight. You don't have to keep him hungry or anything like that. And, that also makes you have a healthier bird and a bird that's going to fly stronger, the bird which is not scared. And then the free lofting too was something that really, helped me keep my birds in one piece, because the Cooper's hawks are always trying to destroy themselves one way or the other if you tie them up. So his way of keeping the birds free lofted, and then from the free loft chamber, just put them in a transport box, no hooding, no nothing. Just for years I wanted to hood my Cooper's hawks, and I think it was a mistake. So why try to confront the bird's nature? Instead of going along with it and finding a way of getting the most out of the bird without confronting it. I think that's one of the big characteristics of McElroy's falconry or philosophy behind his falconry. I'm sure that A lot of people knew him a lot better than I did. But what I can say is that he was, really influential in a lot of Mexican and Latin American falconers, at least in my generation. Guys that are around 50. Many generations of falconers have benefited from what he's wrote and published over the years, and he'll continue to have a big influence on the younger generations of desert hawkers or dirt hawkers or however you want to call them. And people flying Harris hawks and Cooper's hawks and Aplomados will always find a wealth of knowledge and interesting philosophy in his books.
All right. Thanks, Rodrigo, for contributing that on some short notice, and appreciate your contribution to the episode. And I want to end this episode by getting a final thought and sentiment from his wife, Beth, of course, and being a falconer as well. She has, of course, hawked and had more experiences with Harry and doing all these different things than anybody else has. So I felt that it was important to share some final thoughts and have a contribution from her as well. And we managed to record that on the last day that we recorded everything with Harry. So I'm going to end this episode with this final thought from her. And as I stated before, thank you all again so much for sticking with us during this series. And we've got some other great things coming up for you all here in the near future. But all that being said, here is Beth, and thank you all again for listening.
Harry began falconry around 1948. He ended in 2021. And I was blessed with living with a hubby who had a passion. And that is the way to live your life. Follow your passion and bring your joy into your own heart and those around you. And I am very thankful that I got this family and this experience and met many of a lovely falconer besides my Harry.